yogis. It's MJ, Breathe, Move, Shine. Nice to see you again here today. But it may not be the kind of yoga class that you're accustomed to. It's a kind of a yoga class which is actually going to have us settle really heavily into the soft tissues of the body in a variety of, in this case, 3 different postures, so that we can address connective tissue primarily around hips, in the spine, the shoulders, and the neck. Okay? Now, the reason that it's different than a regular yoga class is this is very still. The other classes are very active. And here's what I'd like to say about that really briefly. If you're accustomed to a very vibrant, moving, active, lovely, luscious, warm, whatever kind of a yoga class that you love to experience, this style of yin yoga is equally, if not more important than the practice of activity, particularly in our culture where it's actually valued that you're doing and doing all of the time. And that's why, as you have this experience with me here in 3 postures, you may find it to be kind of unsettling because you're literally not doing anything. So what I'm going to do is have us, like I said, 3 different postures. There are actually in total closer to 20 or 30 postures that we can experience later. But for today, let's just start in a seat. The props are going to be involve using a big bolster, which I hope you can see here, at least 1 big blanket roll and 2 blocks. Set yourself up in a place where you can be uninterrupted. I like to be seating on the bolster or quite possibly a rolled up blanket. And as soon as my sits bones hit that surface of whatever it is I'm sitting on, I let the next exhalation settle me into the posture, into the seat entirely. So as you sit, allow for the next in-breath to have a notice of the diaphragm pulling down so that you can fill the lungs with the next breath. And then as you exhale, a notice of the diaphragm pressing up to exhale all of that breath. So this practice is going to be a very condensed version of what is normally an hour to an hour and a half practice, okay? So we'll just sit here for 1 minute. And our only goal here is to move breath. And also with our eyes gently closed, to have a non-judgmental assessment of what might be going on in your body that you'd like to address here for this 15 minutes. In my case, as I sit here, I'm feeling some things around the tailbone. And so that's going to help me to understand that it will be useful to send the next breath or 2 to that region. And so we'll give it about 3 more breaths, nice and big in the nose, really filling around the entire torso. And as you exhale, quite possibly a little bit of a opened mouth sound. 2 more of those, nice and big in the nose. And a nice long exhale. 1 more, my friends, in the nose. And as you exhale, welcome yourself to this little practice together. We're going to start with a supported child's pose, which is going to use this big bolster in my case, or you could use several rolled up blankets into something that's about this big. I'm also going to put a chunk of that blanket here for the side of my head to rest on. I first sit up, I'm in with my legs folded under me, and if that's tricky for you, go ahead and just send something under your sits bones here is okay. So I'm gonna start an exhalation where I start to lay the spine down on the bolster, and then I disengage completely the arms and just let them be heavy. And I'm probably gonna move around a tiny bit to make sure that things are hitting in a place that will allow me to surrender and dissolve into the bolsters, the props, the way the bones are arranging themselves. And once I'm here, I start to return my concern to my breath. And so as I mentioned, this is a condensed version of a regular class. We'll stay here for about 1.5 minutes. And when we get to the 1.5 minutes, I'll have you switch sides of your head. I'll do it for a second, but I'll turn my head back so you can watch me talk if you need to. What I'd like you to know is that as you're here, although our objective is to find absolute stillness, it's okay to finesse the posture, the props, the bones, the legs, the whatevers, again, in order to ensure that you are able to completely dissolve into the posture. In my case, what I'm noticing is the bolster under my head, the blanket, is actually too high. So I'm going to actually completely move it and feel really lovely about the way that my neck is lining up with the rest of my spine. Having done that, I notice that if I let my jaw go very soft and not doing, I'm somehow able to free up a little more space around the neck. There's an immense amount of connective tissue here, which corresponds with connective tissue and muscles on the tops of the shoulders that many times becomes very congested during the day as we work. And then we go back to the breathing. And we even say to the mind space, which may be kind of busy here, hey, that's okay, you know, just gonna have a look at you, this busyness, and then just let it sort of roll off with the next exhale. Beautiful. My hope is here that you're able to really allow for maybe some bones, arm bones and legs, but mostly the props and the support of the earth to take you in. And here's the part where you will start to switch your head to the opposite side. And I'm going to return to this side just so that we're still in communication. As I mentioned a little bit ago, there was some constriction around my tailbone a few minutes ago, which has eased up by about 30%. I'll take that. For me, when I enjoy the experience of yin yoga, I really like, with behind my eyes being closed, my awareness to travel almost globally all over to notice what maybe is shifting or what maybe requires a bit more attention. Lovely. And by the way, it's okay if you want to open your eyes. Just about another half minute on this side. The only last offer I have here is that you may notice a bit of a jamming up in the shoulders, which tells me I'm just going to move my elbows a little bit wider. Wow, that made a huge difference. I brought all my pet birds today. I'm not sure if you can hear them. 3 more breaths, you guys. Just 3. Into the nose. I'm going to see if I can make that breath go from my nose, through my face, down my neck, all the way zigzag to my toes. Nose to the toes. And that exhale is really just going to invite anything else along the way that might like to offload. 2 more. In the nose. I'm going for 1 more. Nice. And as I deposit that next exhale, nothing's going to move except for my hands are going to slide close to where my knees are. And when I press up out of this shape, my head's going to be dangling really heavily until I have myself completely seated. And I'm just going to sit there for a second and then let my gaze come up. Yeah, so 50% better on that tailbone already. Okay, so basically whatever you had for that last posture, you're going to flat it down probably. We're simply going to turn around. I'm sitting on the ground and that prop is right behind my sacrum here, okay? Going to give you a couple leg options on this. I'm also going to add this back in just to see how it is a landing place for my head. There we go. All right. Have a couple of blocks nearby. So the first thing I'm going to do, again, is always sit. We always like to make sure that we have a foundation that's really anchored first, right? Then I'm just going to walk my hands back. And I'm going to feel the bolster make contact with my spine from the bottom all the way to the top. This is lovely. Now, in my case, this feels great under my head. I have seen people decide they really would love to open up the throat. It's a cool idea too. In my case, I'm going to come up a little bit. And then I'm going to decide what I want to do with my legs. I'll give you a few options. You could allow for the legs to go straight and just feel this kind of lovely long opening on the whole front side of your body. Or you could decide to take the props. I call this prayer pose for the feet. The feet will come together about 12 or 18 inches from your pelvis. I'm going to support the outside of these legs rather than this. Okay, yeah, that's available. But here, I support the outside of the bones of the leg, which weigh quite a bit, right? So that when the leg bones feel the support of the blocks, that cues the inner leg lines to relax. Even if you've got the range, please use the blocks, okay? All right, so that's another option. The other option is quite lovely for low back concerns, is to step the feet wide and let your knees come together so it looks like a little bit of a tent. Okay, once we find ourselves in the best parking space available, we'll stay here for about 3 minutes. So make sure that, whatever choice you made for the legs is possibly addressing the physical concern that you had when you first started out. Possibly. The thing that I'd also like to point out about, I believe, in all of yoga is it's never what does it look like. It's how does it feel. So that's why when we close the eyes and kind of rummage around to decide what to do with things, you're going to be able to find that, I think, with some relative ease. So we'll stay here for just about 3 minutes. And then once you're in, could you just simply notice the expansion of the top side of your torso and the surrender with the breath in and out? Just kind of noticing that. So lovely. And then as you're noticing the movements of the breath, the movements of the rib cage all around, maybe you could a little bit send awareness to the shoulders and the opening of the sternum that's in front of the heart space. And with your eyes closed, can you even notice independent weight of each arm as it rests heavily and doing nothing on the earth or the floor? Beautiful. About 1.5 minutes to go here. Please be okay with the idea of doing nothing. Please be okay with the idea of giving yourself this little bit of time to recalibrate, to kind of soften the tightened tissues in your body. And in this particular posture, the idea of broadening open your heart space. Let's get 3 more breaths. One more, please. And so as you start to reconnect out of this shape, I'm going to use my hands to press those legs together. I'm going to extend the legs long and reach the hands laced up overhead. Just add a little extra tasty morsel to the movement of the ribs and the shoulders. And then use the breath and a press of my hands to the back of my head to lift my head up. Sit for a moment. We're going to actually come back to that posture shape on the bolster, but just to have a moment to sit for a second to see if quite possibly, gee, I think I maybe want to move this bolster back a little bit. So you're going to reposition yourself back down. And then what you're going to do is travel your feet wide and then let your knees drop over in my direction so you can see where I'm going. So what has happened is the pelvis is tipping one side up, and it's starting a spinal spin. I'm going to continue that spin from the tailbone all the way up by coming up, not going to touch this much, just going to send myself around and return the spine to the bolster or the blanket right down the center. I think I won't be needing this. All right, so there's a lot going on here. It can be easier in some bodies for the legs to be a little less far apart. It can also be a little more available to some bodies by coming back up and just shifting things around a little bit. As I mentioned, the purpose of this posture is to start to spin that spinal column all the way around. Now, in some cases, I'll just show you this, some people can go all the way around. You know, some days it's there and some days it's not. I'm just going to come this way to be with you for just a little bit over a minute. It's an always great idea to return to the movement of the breath. And maybe even nudging a body part in a slightly different place. This is an incredibly useful hip opener as it pertains in particular to psoas, which arranges itself first kind of on the outside of the low spine, and it's a muscle group that wraps deeply inside your groin to attaches itself to the leg, inside of the leg. That stuff gets pretty bunched up. And so the yin practice speaks to and addresses softening those tissues primarily by way of the fascia, which wraps each of the muscles and gets really tight and bunchy. So when you feel the tightness, it's a little bit the muscles, but it's mostly fascia and the ligaments and the tendons, actually. Beautiful. Just a little bit more. Let's get 3 more breaths. I'm hopeful that my breaths are big enough that you can actually see my ribs expanding on top. And that's number 3. So all I do is I slide my hands a little bit like we did earlier, press myself up really slowly. I like the idea of not undoing the undoing that you just did. So of course, we'll be needing to go to the other side, and I'll go there to start. I'll probably just stay there with you and just not speak too much this time, all right? So I come back down. This time I'm letting my knees fall to the left. I notice what's going on with the pelvis, the hips, the legs, the spine. I come up just enough to spin myself all the way around. And in this case, I can actually use a little bit of help at the back of my head. Then the arms go really heavy. And I return to breath. Just one more time, I'd like to remind you that it would be so beneficial for you to get yourself to an entire class of this if you can. Because once you're in the postures, you remain there for 3, 4, 5 minutes. Here we have about a half minute left. And that can be incredibly useful and powerful, even for such a short time. So tailbone, I'm feeling a tailbone adjustment here. It's amazing. As if whatever the bunchiness was around it is really letting go. Particularly with each exhalation. That's really cool stuff. 3 more breaths. Let's go. No hurries. Two more. And we'll use the fullness of that third breath to slide the hands closer under the shoulders to the floor. Start to press the floor away. Bring yourself back up. I'm going to spin myself around and come back to the seat to tell you that normally what we would do now is come into Shavasana, which is, that's like dessert, you know, really good dessert. But please just come to a seat and close your eyes and come on in to awareness of whatever might be happening for you. Nice. And so we'll simply breathe the next breath with wide, curious fingers way up overhead. And those hands will come together and land right at home base. Another big in-breath here. And exhale a little sigh. Thanks for being with me again, MJ of Breathe, Move, Shine. I look forward to our next visit together. Namaste.